What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Goodwill Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato. Today, I want to talk to you about the importance of finding your second mountain. I'm not talking, of course, about real mountains, although if you're a mountain climber, good on you. But nonetheless, I'm talking about the distinction between your first mountain in life and your second mountain in life. This idea comes directly from the book, The Second Mountain by David Brooks. The first mountain is your mountain where you're establishing yourself. You're establishing your career, you're establishing your family, you're establishing your reputation, you're establishing your identity, you're building yourself into what you believe is going to be the person, and you're building the foundation for the rest of your life that surrounds you for what you believe is going to take you to, whatever the end of your life, what's going to carry you forward. And a lot of people get stuck in that first mountain. And what we'll see today, there are some people who achieve at such a high level on that first mountain that they completely drop off the cliff. They literally roll over the end of that first mountain and either never make it up a second mountain or never get out of, the bottom of the cliff from the first mountain, and they just don't figure things out. Many people just stay within this comfort zone of the first mountain, this comfort zone of building the self and building a career and building a reputation, because they find this certainty within the first mountain where they feel like that it feels very comfortable, it feels very certain, and they don't think beyond moving past that, because we are a nation of individuals, if you will. We're a nation built on freedom. We're a nation built on, going out and doing things for yourself, even though no human being on earth has ever done anything on their own. But we're a nation about going out and doing things for ourselves. And so we find a career, we stay within the career, we kind of just get comfortable in this way of living, and we never think past that. And a lot of people live kind of a life of, moving along. Everything's just kind of okay. Everything just feels kind of, pretty comfortable. But they also know that there's this feeling that's missing. There's this idea that's missing, that they're not fulfilling something different, which is the second mountain, which is a life that goes beyond yourself and goes to a different purpose. It goes from self-centered to other-centered. Self-centered is not a bad thing. I'm not saying self-centered. You're a self-centered person. All people are self-centered. And when I say other-centered, what I don't mean is self-sacrifice. What I don't mean is doing it because other people think you should do it. What I don't mean is going and just giving your soul to something because you think it's morally right. That's not what I mean. I also don't mean that you should go do things for free for life forever. If you want to, going and volunteering, that's one thing, and that's something that certainly could help fulfill that second mountain for many people. But what I mean is, it's not giving your life up for the sake of doing it. And that's where society is today, is we look at people who do things for themselves, and they succeed in that. Entrepreneurs, business owners, especially, even executives and high-level managers, and they succeed in that, and we think of them as self-centered people. But what we don't realize is those are actually the people that are climbing the second mountain. Those are actually the people that are climbing it, or potentially at the peak of the second mountain. And they've figured out that what they need to do is go beyond their self, and they need to figure out how they can help other people, so that other people can then reap the benefits of whatever it is that they're trying to help them with. And that's the difference. This is not self-sacrifice. The second mountain is not giving yourself away and doing something against your will. And that's what society wants you to do today. They want you to do things against your will. They want you to accept things against your will. But that's not what this is about. That's not what living life is about. And that's not what being and fulfilling a purpose is about. Fulfilling a purpose is knowing deep inside that you think and believe that there's something that you can do that you can have an impact on that will then impact other people. That's fulfilling a purpose, and that's being other-centered. That's what it means to be other-centered. And it's important to understand that distinction, because so many people look at being other-centered as, well, I just have to do it whether I like it or not. For instance, rich people. Those rich people, they need to give their money away so that everyone else can have no. That's not the way that it works. They don't need to just give it away because it makes everybody else happy. They've earned their money because they've helped so many people. They've earned the right to have that, to make that, because they have helped so many people, because they have actually gone beyond themselves. They have gone to other-centered. They have gone to the point of seeing a problem and filling the problem. And the bigger the problem, the more the reward. And that's where society is just completely mixed up right now, because society doesn't show you that. Society thinks you should just give your soul away and be a martyr to a cause, whether or not you agree with it or whether or not you make any money. As a matter of fact, it's better if you don't make money. You just need to live a complete deprived, poverty-stricken life, and that's what makes you a good person. Yeah, ask that person how much they're actually appreciating life. And at the end of their life, ask them what they think, because there's a very damn good chance that they'll tell you something significantly different than what they bought into earlier in their life. So that's what it means to go from the first mountain to the second mountain. The first mountain is something everybody goes through, self-centered, where you're trying to build the self. You're trying to build a life for yourself, and you're starting that foundation. But then the goal is transitioning to that second mountain. And like I said, most people, the vast majority, the masses, just kind of settle into that first mountain and they stay there and they just kind of live okay. They just kind of, some people are totally fine with it, but a lot of people just feel an uneasiness about life. They get to a certain age, middle age, and they feel this uneasiness. It's like, this itch that something just isn't right. And a lot of people just ignore it and they just keep going, and then that uneasiness is there forever. But they don't realize that that's the itch for the second mountain. That's the itch for the next big thing. And then, of course, there's those few people, the small percentage, who they achieve really high on that first mountain, and then they just can't figure out at all what to do on that second mountain. It's like that second mountain isn't even in view for them, because they've achieved so much during that first mountain that person just falls off the cliff. And of course, we don't want to be that person either, because many of us achieve goals and then we think that we can't achieve other goals because we're like, well, that's the best thing that I could do. That's essentially reaching the pinnacle of the mountain and then thinking that you can't move to the next mountain, can't move to the next thing in life where you achieve something bigger. Achieving something bigger essentially is helping more people. It's going beyond yourself and moving toward others. And that's the idea. And that's going to take us to another book, which is the book that sparked this whole idea in the first place. But before we get to that, I'll encourage you to hit pause real quick and go and give us a quick review, or subscribe if you're on YouTube, because again, as always, the more reviews we have, the more subscribers we have, the more people we reach, the more people can then go find their second mountain, can go find the thing that can serve other people, the thing that fulfills them, that fulfills their purpose in life, and at the same time helps and serves other people. Do you understand the magic in that? Do you understand the magic in doing something that fulfills you as a person, that fulfills you, that fulfills a purpose, that makes you feel good, and hey, at the same time makes you good money, but helps other people? And the more people you help, the more fulfilled you feel, and the more money you make, and the more people you help. Do you understand the magic in that? So, by subscribing and by giving us a review, you're then helping more people. You are starting to slowly move up that second mountain. So thank you for taking the time to do that. So let's, excuse me, drink some of this fancy Perrier sparkling water. Perrier, sorry for you fancies out there. Excuse me. I've just been on an insane sparkle water kick. So it turns out that there aren't many gas stations that sell sparkling water. Not that I've gone into every gas station I drive by, but I've gone into a number of them, and they never have any sparkling water. So I go to Walgreens, and I generally like Liquid Death. That's so far been my favorite sparkling water. There's others that are good too. But I feel like they're always out. So this is the second one. This one's pretty good, this Perrier. But nonetheless, so the book that sparked this idea to talk about climbing the second mountain and moving to the second mountain is a book by David Ambrose. Undaunted Courage is the name of the book. The book is specifically about Meriwether Lewis and the expedition across the Louisiana Purchase once Thomas Jefferson purchased the territory of Louisiana. For those of you who don't know about Meriwether Lewis and Lewis and Clark and the expedition across to the west, first of all, I would say if you don't know who that is, then our education system definitely needs to be torn down and rebuilt, because that's one of the foundations of the United States. But nonetheless, just a quick history lesson, because this will help us understand the rest of the story. Meriwether Lewis was an adventurer in Virginia, I believe is where he was originally from. And Thomas Jefferson knew him as an acquaintance and eventually got to know him a little better. And when Thomas Jefferson bought Louisiana, the territory of Louisiana, what it was known as back then, he knew that it needed to be, that someone needed to go, search for it. What he really wanted to find was an all-water route from, I believe, St. Louis to the West Coast. He wanted to find an all-water route to be able to get there, but he also wanted to figure out everything that there could be, what kind of animals were out there, what kind of plants were out there, what other things were out there that we could find. Go make acquaintances and friends with the Indians so that we could start making connections and having fur trade and things like that. And that's what he really wanted to do. And he knew that Meriwether Lewis was probably the person to do that, because Meriwether Lewis, from Thomas Jefferson's interactions with him, was, number one, already a great adventurer. He was already a great woodsman. He knew more about the area that the United States already encompassed than most other people. And number two, his willingness to learn and his willingness to understand areas like zoology and botany and geography and things like that he would need to be able to take notes on and research and write about during the trip. Meriwether Lewis, Thomas Jefferson believed, was the kind of person who could do that. He also believed he was a very disciplined person, because Meriwether Lewis he went through the army to some degree. I can't remember exactly how. Even his schooling was in leadership and army leadership. So he was very disciplined himself, and Thomas Jefferson believed that he would then be disciplined to lead what would come to be called the Corps of Discovery. And as it turns out, Thomas Jefferson was 100% correct. So he chose Meriwether Lewis to lead the Corps of Discovery, along with William and Clark, which is where the name Lewis and Clark comes from. Technically, they were equals, or at least Meriwether Lewis decided they were equals. The United States decided that they were not equals, because you need to have one person in charge, but nonetheless, that's not important. But Meriwether Lewis is the one that was the leader of the group, if you will. Thomas Jefferson chose him, and Meriwether Lewis went out and got his Corps of Discovery together, which ended up being about 40 people, give or take. Can't remember the exact number. And he made it over to the West Coast and back, and they lost, I believe, one person. One of their men died very early on in the expedition from disease. And one Indian died because he had stole something and they were trying to get it back from him, and I think they stabbed him or something. I can't remember exactly what they did. But the fact that only one of his men died and only one Indian died, and they never had uh, shoot offs, altercate, like they almost had altercations with Indians, but they never had any significant ones. First of all, the language barrier that had to be overcome, the amount of tension that there would be between a bunch of white people walking around and Indians walking around and white people walking in the Indian territory and so on and so forth. Meriwether Lewis's ability to just be able to make sure that things are good between everybody, that ability alone is just phenomenal. Can't imagine that there are many people today, living today, that would be able to do that. Just the idea of being able to do that. Not only that, but just to think about, he found the number of things. He found 120 new plants. He found like 20 new animals. I'm kind of making this off the top of my head because I don't remember precisely, but he found a bunch of new things to science. Like he found it, he wrote about it, he came up with names for them. He took observations of the stars in like longitude and latitude and things like that. One person, and he was 31 years old when he was doing this. 31 he was when he was doing this. So Thomas Jefferson was correct in his assumption on Meriwether Lewis. And for Meriwether Lewis, this was his first mountain. This was him claiming his stake to himself. He was going out. He was going to lead the expedition. He was the guy, even though William Clark was there to do it with him, and he agreed that him and Clark were equals. But this was his baby, if you will. And this was his claiming his stake on his first mountain. And he made it over and back. And he did it in pristine manner. And then, when he got back, I think it was 1806 or something like that, he got back. For the first 6 months or so, of course, it was just complete mayhem and chaos because everyone wanted to talk to the expedition and hear about everything and so on and so forth. So his attention went elsewhere. Thomas Jefferson ended up making him governor of the Louisiana Territory at the same time. So he had the potential to then start to move to the second mountain, to start to move to being other-centered. But he never let his first mountain go. He never let that achievement that he just had, that big, huge, gigantic, whether or not he realized how big of a deal that was, I'm sure he understood to a degree, but I don't think he's able to think 200 years down the road and people would still be talking about him. He'd be getting taught, hopefully. He's like the expedition is being taught to people in school, and people are researching him and trying to understand everything about the expedition. Whether or not he thought through that, I don't know, but I'm sure he knew it was a big deal. So he wasn't able to let that peak go when he got back. Because after the first 6 months or so, he started drinking again. He was, back then, being a drinker, was kind of a normal thing. So that's not unusual, but he started drinking more heavily. He started taking opium. He started doing all these other things. He was very unreliable in his governorship. He never did anything. The journals that he took, he wrote, I can't remember how many journals, but he had trunks full of journals that he was going to get published. And of course, he would have made all kinds of money off that publishment. And, who knows how much that would have just extended his people's belief in him, but he never published the journals. He never did anything with them. He always told people he would. He told Thomas Jefferson that's something he would do. Thomas Jefferson was the one that told him to keep the journals and the one that told him to go do this, but he never published them. He never did anything with them because he couldn't let it go. Because he believed that was the only, he had reached the pinnacle and there was no pinnacle after that. There was no anything beyond that pinnacle. It literally took 100 years to get those journals published before anybody did anything with them. So to ruin the story, and it's worth reading the book anyway, or at least understanding the expedition overall. In 1809, Meriwether Lewis ends up killing himself because he was so mentally drained and so mentally deteriorated, and just believed so wholeheartedly that there was nothing beyond what he had just done. He had gotten himself into such a deep state where there's nothing beyond the pinnacle that he had just achieved, that he believed that there was just nothing left. There's nothing to move forward to. There's nothing to go to, because he had achieved so much on that first mountain. And if you look today, Olympic athletes, there are many Olympic athletes, especially ones who weren't meant to do much great, but they end up winning a gold medal. Those kinds of Olympic athletes end up doing a lot of the same thing. They reach a pinnacle, and because they reach that pinnacle, they think that there's nothing left for them to go do. Astronauts go through the same sort of mental challenges. Athletes, professional athletes, once they finish with their sport, that's a self-centered activity, if you will. Once they're finished with their sport, they don't shift their mind to how they can then help others. Many of them just struggle. They just have a really hard time. And it's because they don't take the time to make that shift, to figure out how they can move in another direction, to go beyond their self, transcend yourself, and move into a place where you're helping other people, where you are fulfilling a different purpose and helping others. And so that's what happened with Meriwether Lewis, is that he was not able to go beyond that first mountain and move to that second mountain, and understand that he could fulfill a much bigger purpose, a much broader purpose. Yeah, for sure. What he just did was, not many people live up to that kind of standard, what he just did, in the way that he did it, and the thing itself, the expedition itself, which I said will continue to live forward. Not many people will be in that situation, but still he could have opened his eyes to be able to see how he could reach beyond other people, or beyond himself, to help other people. Now, like I said, many people, 99% of people won't be in that situation, or in the situation of Olympic athletes, or the situation of astronauts or professional athletes. Of course, 99% of people will never be there. But the same idea applies. The same idea applies to every human being on this earth to some degree. If you look at entrepreneurs, especially nowadays, there's a number of them, a bunch of them, that reach a pinnacle quicker. It's become easier to be able to reach a pinnacle much quicker. It's still not easy, for sure, but it's become easier because of technology to jump very quickly and reach a pinnacle. And a lot of them are freaking miserable, just miserable, because they did that so quickly, and because their mindset wasn't ready for it, or they didn't start to transition their mindset to the next phase of life, to the next season of life, where you go beyond the self and start to help others. So how then do we start to do that? Well, before we get to that point, I'll tell you, of course, my backstory, because I can relate to this, of course, not to the complete degree that Meriwether Lewis did, because I'm still around, but excuse me. But I can relate. Meriwether Lewis had a tendency for melancholy, if you will, and I would say I do too, to a degree, especially during transitions. And there are two transitions that I think about specifically for me, where my mental state was, where I had a lull in my mental state. One of them, I would say, was depression, definitely. The second one wasn't depression per se, but there was still just mental anguish. So the first one was transitioning from being an athlete to going out and being what would end up being an entrepreneur. I played college football, And I think I graduated college at like 23 or so, maybe 24. I took my time. But I played college football, and I remember when I got done for college football, there was about a 2 year period of time where I was depressed, for lack of a better term. My mental state was not good. I still went out and did things, but if I wasn't out either at work or I wasn't, with people, many times I would not allow myself to go out with people. I would just stay home. I didn't feel like I had a purpose. I didn't feel like I had much drive. And then I started to, get into personal training and things like that. And I started to open the business, and suddenly I found another purpose. I found another drive. I found another thing to pick me up and move me forward. Well, that was 10 years of my life. During that same time, I got married right around the same time I opened the business. And that also helped catapult me forward as well, kind of pick me up and move me forward, gave me another thing to drive for and to fulfill. And then last year, in 2023, I closed the business and got divorced. So, as you can imagine, again, a lot of mental anguish there. Now, those things were both premeditated, meaning I I I thought through the closing of the business, and I thought through through the divorce. However, that doesn't mean that they were easy. That doesn't mean that my mind was totally prepared for it, because they were new to me. It's the first time I had gone through closing a business or getting a divorce. Hopefully the last for both, but it's the first time I had done it. So my mind wasn't totally prepared for it. So there was plenty of mental anguish there, and there was plenty of questioning, and there was plenty of worrying, and there was plenty of just feeling lost and feeling like things weren't going right. If you go back and you listen to even some of the podcasts, just 6 months ago, or some of my content on social media from 8 months ago, my demeanor is much different. You can see in my demeanor that my face is just not, it's not there. It's not, even the color of it is not full. The way that I'm talking, the things that I'm talking about are a little more negative, or the way that I'm talking about them is a little more negative. So that was real. That was something that I felt disconnected for a bit. And until my mind grasped onto the next purpose, the next drive, the next thing that was going to help move me forward, then that I had a harder time. So, excuse me. So the goal is to be able to move through these things, recognize that it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. There's going to be that lull where it's just like, I don't feel, I feel this disconnect. My brain's just like trying to figure out what my purpose and why I'm here, and questioning everything. And should I go back to the way things were? But if you keep pushing forward and you keep driving and you keep just letting the process happen, then you can find something on the other side of it that will then pull you forward. So how do we start to do that? Well, the first thing that we need to do is integrate that first experience, is integrate that first mountain into ourself and into our psyche. Because I think what a lot of people do is they believe that those experiences, is if they let them go, then they don't count. That it's not a thing that was a part of me. And I'm going this direction, and I'm letting it go, and I'm going to a new thing, but that was the best thing that I've done. And if I let it go, then I don't have it anymore. Well, of course you have it. You still did it. You still accomplished that thing. People, for instance, who have a hard time letting their high school athletic sports go. There's a lot of men, especially, do this. Have a hard time. They still talk about their high school times, how great they were, and how great it was to win state championships, and how they, played well, and so on and so forth. That's not being able to let go of that time where you were good at that thing, and still trying to define yourself as that. Even though you have the capability to move in a different direction, you can still use this, but move in a different direction. So you have to be able to take that, integrate it into yourself, your body, your psyche, and everything, so that you recognize you're not letting it go. You accomplished those things. You achieved those things. You learned stuff along the way. You became better. You grew into a different person. You did all of that. It's all real. It's all true. But you can't hang on to it, and you can't continue to move back. Integrate it. Bring it in. Pull it in. Make it part of you. Make you realize that it is you. You did that. And then, next, move your mind to the future. Start to figure out how you can use that experience to move yourself to the future, to move yourself down the road. There's a couple questions that you can think about. Number one is, how can you stay within the same domain, but expand your purpose to fulfill and help more people? So for instance, for Meriwether Lewis, if he wanted to take what he had done, stayed within the same domain, by domain I mean, like for him, it would have been being an adventurer and going on expeditions. So for you, for the person who's hanging on to their, basketball career from high school, that's the domain, basketball or sports. So how do you stay within that same domain, but reach more people? Meriwether Lewis, for instance, could have became a guide to help people get to the West. Could have became a guide to get people to the other side and help people establish relationships with Indians and help people establish fur trade and help people establish themselves in the wild, wild West. So for you, what is that? What's the domain that you're hanging on to where you've achieved a high level, but you feel like you can't let it go? You feel like that's the best that you could do. And how can you expand beyond that to then help more people? Another thing to think about is, how can you use the skills and abilities that you built during that time to then go do something different? Because skills and abilities is really what it's all about. If you look at the most successful people in the world in anything, skills and abilities, that's what it's all about. If you think about the line, for instance, or the idea, if you took all the money in the world and you did distribute it evenly, if you distributed it evenly through everybody, in a matter of a year or two, it would be back in the same hands. Not because those people will go steal it from everybody, but because they had the skills and abilities to go make money. They had the skills and abilities to go do things and to attract money. That's what it's about. So how do you take the skills and abilities that you've developed over the time of whatever it is, whatever that first mountain was for you, whatever that pinnacle was for you, or whatever the career path that you've been on that you just feel like is not fulfilling you anymore, not bringing you any purpose, or not bringing you any drive? How do you take those skills and abilities and use it to move you forward into the next thing, into the thing that is other-centered, that reaches more people, that fulfills a bigger purpose? So if you take those two things, if you start with integrating your experience and recognize that if you let it go, it doesn't mean it's gone. It doesn't mean it goes away. You are that experience. It is now in you. It is now part of you. If you integrate it, and then you take your mind and you shift it to the future, and you ask yourself, if I love this thing, if I love sports, if I love basketball, if I love entrepreneurship, if I love the career that I'm in, how do I then shift my attention to something broader so that I can help more people but stay within the same domain? And how do I use my skills and abilities to fulfill that at the same time? Then you can start to move up the second mountain. And up that second mountain is purpose and fulfillment. That's what's up that second mountain. I believe that all human beings are meant to help, go beyond yourself and to help others. Again, that is not self-sacrifice. That is not doing things just because other people believe you should do them, or because you believe it's morally right and I'm going to sacrifice myself and be a martyr and blah, blah, blah. That's not at all what that means. It means doing something because it is fulfilling to you and because you believe it is purposeful and you believe that you're meant to do it and you believe it's going to help others and you're going to get rewarded for it at the same time. And the harder that you drive to that and the faster you go and the more you work, the more people you help, the more you get rewarded, the more you feel fulfilled. That's what I'm talking about. That's what it's all about. That's what climbing the second mountain is about. And that's what you don't want to miss. So get your climbing shoes on, get your pack ready, get yourself ready, and get climbing. Because there's no point in standing around waiting for it to happen for you. There's no point in looking around and waiting for someone to nudge you along, because you're the only one that can do it for you. You're the only one that can make the choice. And you can move in that direction if you let it happen. If you integrate your previous experiences, recognize that you are the sum of your skills and abilities. It has nothing to do with the things that you've accomplished. Yeah, that's great. That's good. That's great. Put them in, integrate them, make them part of you, but it is your skills and abilities that no one can ever take away from you. That's what it's about. So get out there, find your second mountain, find that purpose in life that you know that you've been put on this earth for, and make it happen. Until next time, here's to your 1% growth every single day.